All right, so I think we're all live, and so we'll just kind of get started here. Hello, nice to see you guys. Just uh, all right, we're good to go. Okay, so just a quick introduction. My name is Mark. I am the owner of Nomadik Customs in Portland, Oregon. I represent a group of extraordinary craftspeople and artisans who have a huge passion for their trade craft. And we've had the incredible fortune of having vans as our canvas over the last 6 years or so. We've currently built over 60 custom vans, all unique and none alike. So it's pretty much easy to say that we've encountered a number of puzzles. We've made all the mistakes. We also have a full installation and repair shop. So we've encountered a bunch of different puzzles from DIYers and fellow professional shops. There's an incredible amount of information out there. So hopefully the goal for today is to create a bit of a syllabus of procedures, organize some of those thoughts, provide some things to think about, and hopefully we can do some useful tips and pointers for your possible upcoming and current projects. So that's me in a very tiny nutshell. Today, we're going to cover a bunch of topics and hopefully have some time to answer questions towards the end. So let's get started. Real quickly, I just want to say that my experience in this community has been incredibly inclusive. So whether you have a budget of $5,000 or $400,000, you're a DIYer or a professional, starting a personal project, working to create a van building business, there's a place for you. So don't get discouraged. Live your van life. There's always going to be someone out there to get you through all this information. So hi from everybody that is making comments right now. And so I just kind of want to touch on starting from the beginning. So one of the things that I try to guide a lot of my clients through is the biggest thing is we're really excited. You want to get into a van. You want to see what it's going to look like. You start thinking about all the colors and textures and fabrics and all the things that you're wanting to put into your van. But there's a lot of thought process that needs to happen behind that because the story that I hear more often than not is I got my whole van built and I forgot to put in garbage and recycling bins or a laundry basket or deal with some of the other axillary things. Every single inch in these things counts. So we kind of dissect a little bit of the lifestyle that goes on and how you want to live out the van that you're doing. The biggest thing that I would suggest is getting a journal going, whether it's an analog or digital journal. I'm more of an analog guy, so I like to write everything out. But basically, if you want to consider all the things that you're going to do as you're starting to put the thought process out towards building your van. So what I like to start with is how many people are going to be in your van. Do you need to support pets? Are you hauling grandchildren or people that are very special to you? And so do you need seatbelts? Do you need to have the structure in your van to support having multiple amounts of seating and that sort of thing? We kind of want to dissect your personal habits. And so that the transition of whether you're a weekend warrior going on long extended trips or going full-time living in the van, you want it to be an extension of what you've already created in your own personal life, in your household and all that stuff. An example is, refrigerators. In the middle of the night, you kind of open up your door and you grab what you want to grab and you know where it is and all that stuff. If you have a chest style refrigerator, now we're having to dig through it and find things. So the biggest thing that I like to try to do when I'm talking to my clients is make the transition easy. And so, so are you a side sleeper? Do you sleep on your back? Those things matter because, again, when we're talking inches and what direction the bed is going to go in the van, all these different things, we need to make those considerations. It's an extension of your personality, and we like to think of these spaces as your sanctuary. You get to move about in your sanctuary. So what climates are you going to be in? What terrain do you want to cover? Is this going to be a road queen and you're specifically going to stay on the highways? Are you going to go more of a kind of land yacht where you post up in easy places? Or is this something where you're going to go more off-road, off-terrain, get back into the public lands, that sort of thing? So that's something to consider when you're moving forward with all this. And again, this is kind of where you would write all this stuff down in your journal to kind of dissect and analyze how you're going to fit into the process of the van build itself. Another thing to kind of consider is your showering habits. Are you someone that showers once every couple days? Are you someone that needs a shower every single morning? What kind of things that need to integrate into all of that. Kitchen habits. Are you someone who wants to make their coffee and then make their eggs, or someone that wants to make your coffee and eggs at the same time? So those are also considerations. And all these things that I'm kind of suggesting as considerations are things that are going to marry up to the systems that are going to support the lifestyle that you want. And so as we kind of move forward with all of this, we're going to kind of touch on those different things, and we'll kind of dissect each system or each topic of a van build, and then we'll kind of open it up for some questions and that stuff. But so much of this, kind of like painting a house or a room or something, 80% of it is in the prep work. And then the last 20% is in all the fun stuff that everybody wants to talk about right off the get. But we really got to dissect your personality, your lifestyle, how you want to use the van, how you want to live in the van. And so you're living in the van rather than out of the van, if that makes any sense. All right. So once we kind of figure out some of your personal habits, like I have suggested, sleep habits, showering habits, cooking habits, all the things that we just kind of do on the daily without even really thinking about it. Every single inch of space matters in these vans. And so we really want to design the van so that it fits every single thing that you have going on. So kind of ask yourself some of that. Pets are another big thing to consider. A lot of people have questions for me about providing air conditioning and climate control for your pets. And there are, on every topic, there's a full arc. There's a lot of information out there. And there's a full arc of things that you can do. You can either, plan ahead and board your pet when you're doing long hikes and you know that you're going to be away from your van for a long time. And then you can set it up to where you have your climate control turned on, you have cameras, you have all these different things inside. So, depending on the depth of what you want to go, it's just kind of, the full arc of products that you would want to consider as we are, again, dissecting that lifestyle that you have. So once we kind of journaled that out and we figured out what those specific things are going to be, then what we can do is start getting to a place to where we're planning for the expenses and the important pieces of the van. So I always like to tell my clients that the most important part of your van is going to be your insulation system, and the most expensive part of your van is going to be your electrical and power system. Real quickly, I'm going to segue into talking about propane and electricity. For years, propane was the mainstay in all RV and travel applications. And now the technology is definitely caught up to where you can basically have a power system that could support even using like a small welder or something like that on. So we tend to kind of segue away from propane in the sense that diaphragms go bad. You have to worry about carbon monoxide when you're in a closed up van. So you need to have plenty of ventilation, carbon monoxide alarms, all that kind of stuff. Propane is definitely affected by elevation and by temperature, extreme temperatures, but definitely by elevation. So I've personally been in a vehicle at high elevation in Colorado, and the pilot light would not light because there wasn't enough oxygen for it to light up. So if you decide to go with a propane system, I highly suggest that you make space in your van to have it closed off, have the regulator in his area of the van that's airtight, or have an external propane tank that is going to allow for the regulator and everything to be able to leak if it needs to, if for instance, the diaphragm goes back or something like that. But all that kind of to say that I highly suggest moving towards electricity. And by moving towards electricity, you're going to be able to support a lot of the lifestyle choices that you're making in that initial setup of how you want to use your van and how you want to live in your van or live out of your van. And basically what that comes down to is you have two types of battery. You have either lithium or you have deep cycle gels. And deep cycle gels, you're going to have about a 30 to 80% charge discharge rate. In lithium batteries, you're going to have about a 10 to 90% charge discharge rate, basically meaning that the lifespan of the battery is going to be better if you go with the lithium. So all this to kind of steer you towards going with a lithium-based battery system. And then from there, we can kind of take some of the things that you want to support, whether it be solar-powered air conditioning or whether you want to add a variety of different kitchen appliances, that sort of thing. And so we'll talk about a power audit here in a second. But if we're kind of steering towards using an electrical system as opposed to, the variety of using propane, electricity, and other things, then you're going to have a lot more control and ability to track how much your power you're using. And that's going to be able to help you out in the future with all the other components that you're wanting to put into your van. So to backtrack, I said that the most important part of your van is your insulation system. So let's talk about that really quick. Basically, you're inside of a metal box, so no matter what vehicle that you're deciding to use. So a lot of things that I see on a lot of the DIY projects and things that come through our service center is we'll put in sound mat, which is the butyl-based product that you put into your skin of the vehicle. The kind of philosophy behind hot box and cold box. So hot environment on the inside, cold on the outside. The metal is going to act as your conductor, and it's going to basically create condensation. So you want to relieve that condensation by covering your entire van skin in a with a butyl-based thermal break. And so rather than just putting one square of the butyl-based mat on a section of the van, which helps with sound and vibration of the metal, we're actually advising that you cover the entire metal space. You don't need to necessarily cover the frame of the vehicle, but covering the skin of the vehicle from the inside with the butyl-based product. What that does is it creates an initial thermal break. And so because it's a foil backed and it has that butyl-based product on it, what it's basically doing is it's allowing for there not to be condensation that draws on the inside. One of the things that we do here in my company is we use a variety of different products to insulate your van. So we're able to pack a hard R value, like a really high R value, into a small amount of space. Typically, we can get somewhere between about a R13 to R16 in the walls, an R10 to an R12 in the ceiling, and then an R10 to R12 in the floors. And we pack that by using those multiple materials into a really small depth of space. And so how you would want to do that is have your initial thermal break. We personally use an air gap material. So we use Reflectix, which is a double foil backed bubble wrap. And what that does isn't necessarily provide you any sort of insulation value, but it does create an air gap, which basically acts as a secondary thermal break between outside surface and inside surface. So it's a really great material to use. I see a lot of people advising against it, but that's because they're trying to use it as an insulating R value product. And it's not what we do here is we don't really design, or we don't really use it in that sort of design. What we're using it as is a thermal break. So if you have your butyl-based material that has a foil base, you have a double foiled air gap, which then allows you to have that thermal break. And then you also have a rigid foam insulation, which is double foil based, and then a loft insulation. You're basically using 4 materials in a very small space, about 2.5 inches, that increases that R value. Whereas if you use one product on itself, and alone, it's only going to have the R value of that. And when you compact loft insulation into each other, or you compact like a 4-inch insulation into a 2-inch insulation space, you're actually taking the R value down, because part of that insulation value is to have the air that's in the insulation to be able to act as an insulated barrier. So if you want to kind of give yourself a high R value, I would suggest using multiple materials. The loft section of the insulation, you would basically, there's a couple different materials. There's a wool insulation material, and there is sort of a polysorbent material that we like to use as well. And basically, you can double up. If you don't want to use rigid foam, you can double up your loft layer. If you don't want to use a synthetic product and you want to use wool, then you can double up that layer as well. There are different R values to those materials. And so by looking at those R values, for instance, wool will be around an R6 to an R7. If you double layer it up, you kind of get into like around an R9. If you are using multiple materials and a synthetic loft, then you're basically getting about an R14 to an R16 by the time that you get walls up. I see a question about spray foam, and What I would say is spray foam is one of those things that is a little bit risky. It's time consuming, and you can compact a lot of R value into a small amount of space with spray foam, but you're taking the risk of it chemically reacting and actually warping the metal. And also, it's incredibly messy. I've done a couple of them, and it's incredibly messy. And by layering different product, you're actually getting the same R value that you would be with spray foam in that amount of space. So given the fact that you can take it out, you can do all these different things with the different layered approach of using multiple materials, you're going to be able to kind of save yourself the headache as well as the risk of potentially warping your van. Also, when you are doing spray foam, anything that is embedded in that spray foam has to be hot knifed out if there's any mistakes being made, but we'll kind of cover some of that in the future here. What we specifically use here is we use a butyl-based product. There's a couple different ones that we use. We use Sound Mat, which actually has an R value of up to 4 in it. Or we use Kill Mat, which has about an R value of R1 or R2. Then you have your Reflectix layer, which acts as a secondary thermal break for that's double foiled. And then we have a rigid foam layer, which basically bumps up your R value. Like I said before, you can also use the 2 layers of the loft insulation. And then we finish that with a Thinsulate synthetic insulation. The reason why I like synthetic over wool is because synthetic actually has bug and water resistance and mold resistance in it, because it's a synthetic fiber, where wool is more of a natural fiber. And synthetic also has a structure where wool does not have a structure. So I've seen vans where we have in our service center come out where they've put wool insulation in their van, and it's all compacted down over lots of road miles. And the bottom 8 inches of their wall cavity is extremely insulated, and then there's no insulation in the top. So make sure that if you do decide to use wool, that you are also using some sort of spray foam, or it's not spray foam, but spray adhesive to kind of keep things in place so that it doesn't compact over time. Also, if it ever does get wet, it has a very good hay smell to it. And there is some, once you kind of get that hay smell in there, it does tend to attract rodents and bugs and that sort of thing too. So it's a great material. I'm not poo-pooing it, but I'm just saying that there are pluses and advantages to using the different materials. We here decide to use the synthetic because it is resistant to mold. It is resistant to water, and it does have structure to stay in place, and so that you don't end up with a very nice insulated 7 inches at the bottom of your rail. So, but we do use on request for our clients, we do use wool as well. It's just we make sure that there's a structure set to that. Sometimes we'll get a roll of paper and put the wool on it with spray adhesive and then put the paper up. But we want to make sure to have those thermal break layers in place in order to make that happen. I'm spending a lot of time on the insulation because it really is kind of the most important step in your entire van build. It's what's going to make you comfortable, keep your climate control decent. It's going to save you on energy. And as climate is changing and we're dealing with hotter summers and colder winters and a lot of wet this year, it's just one of those things that I would suggest kind of making sure that you spend a lot of time researching. And of course, I'm definitely available for questions in the future if you ever decide to kind of research a little bit further. But your insulation layer is going to be the most important thing that you do to your van. So we're going to kind of start these base layers up on all these different systems, and then be able to go from there, and thus improving the quality of your experience, because this is a beautiful lifestyle, and I'd hate for people to get into it and first time out get black mold in their walls, and next thing you know, it becomes a little bit of a disaster, and you get very discouraged about experiencing these wonderful connections and stuff that you can be doing in van life. So definitely spend the time to research some of the insulation systems, because there's really a lot of information out there when it comes to insulation, and there's a lot of, unfortunately, wrong information out there. But just try to consider those things. As we're talking about insulation, one of the biggest insulation sucks of your van is going to be your windows. And so it's great to have lots of light. I encourage you to have as much light as you can have possible. But what I would definitely recommend is that you make the considerations of how many windows you put into your van if you're concerned about going into extreme climates. There are a number of products out there that you can insulate your windows with, mostly coverings. And as you're doing your build, there's a lot of tricky things that you can do to kind of create the space to give yourself a really good insulated layer. So if you're planning on getting into extreme conditions or spending a lot of time in ski area parking lots and all that kind of stuff, then you're going to want to make those considerations. I see a couple comments about how you live in different climates. So again, going back to the very first thing that we were talking about journaling, and making sure that you are designating your lifestyle, what kind of climates you want to spend the most time in. Are you going to move migratory? Are you just going to take those 2 to 3 week vacations to a specific area, all that kind of stuff. So just make sure that as you make these considerations in your lifestyle, that you are able to now marry the systems up. So your insulation system, again, is going to be one of the most important pieces and parts to consider. So just kind of, let's see, it says, can you review the 4 layers? Yes. So we want a butyl-based thermal break, Reflectix, but rather than utilizing it as a insulation property, we're going to be utilizing it as an air gap, therefore creating a larger thermal break from exterior surface to interior surface. You can do a rigid foam insulation, double foil backed. In between there, usually around 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch thick. It's giving you about an R5 to an R7, and then finalize it with a loft insulation, be it wool or be it Thinsulate. And the difference between those, again, is that Thinsulate is going to have, because it's a synthetic, it's going to have a little bit more mold resistance as well as structure to it. So that's insulation. Now let's move on to, once we have the windows in, as part of that insulation, we're going to make those considerations of how many windows go into your van as well. Okay, so from there, we are going to talk a little bit about power. And I touched on it a little bit about different ways that you can do your power system, be it partial propane or all electric. I would steer everybody to go more towards an electric. And within that electric, I would steer people to go more towards a lithium-based power system. But I'm going to tell you a little bit of an equation, and we're going to try to figure out a power audit and figure out how you're going to use your space, as well as the biggest um, uh, power draws that you're going to have. So there's a simple formula to kind of figuring out wattage. And what that is you take your amps times your volts, and that is going to equal your watts. So for example, if you have a 100 amp hour battery and you're running it on a system of 12 volts, you are now producing 1200 watts of power. Everything in power is based off of a 1 hour, or based off of time. So basically a 1 hour block of time. So let's say you have a blender, and that blender is 700 watts. That means that if you ran that blender for an entire hour, it would consume 700 watts of power. So if you have a 1200 watt battery and you are using a blender for an entire hour, which we all know you would never run a blender for an hour, but it would use essentially 700 watts of power. So as you're making these considerations into your power system, you again are going to times your amps times your volts, and that is going to give you your watts. So basically, the number of batteries, or the amount of amp hours that you have, is going to be your storage of power. And so think of it as being on grid. And so if we have one battery and we have an induction cooktop that uses 1800 watts, and your battery is only allowing you to use 1200 watts of power, well, then you're not going to be able to do that. So that's why we start adding batteries. So typically, if you are just kind of a weekend warrior and you're hanging out and doing a number of things on your power system that are pretty basic, you can get away with around 2 to 3 batteries. And you're basically, more batteries equals less arithmetic. So what I mean by that is, if you're cooking something on a single burner induction cooktop, then you're going to be basically, having a 900 watts of power usage. And now you're only cooking for 20 minutes. So now you're going to have to take that 900 watts and divide it by an hour of time and figure out that you're using about 250 watts. So more batteries, less arithmetic, less having to think about it, that sort of thing. So if you have a 4 or 6 or 800 amp hour system, then you're giving yourself, 5, 7, or 10,000 watts to be able to use. And that is going to help you support multiple systems, as well as multiple appliances. So going back to that initial talk of what kind of lifestyle are you going to be living in this, we are now talking about whether you want to make your coffee and your eggs at exactly the same time, or whether you're okay with making your coffee first, shutting off your instant pot or whatever, and then going and making your eggs. So a lot of this is going to be based, again, on the lifestyle that you're wanting to provide yourself in the van build. So once we kind of figure out some of those equations, and you are kind of generally figuring out how much of a power audit that you're going to be using, then you can kind of start determining how big your power system needs to be to support the lifestyle that you're living. I'm brushing over a whole bunch of details. And so, again, if you have any questions, please reach out. But generally speaking, if you kind kind of do a basic power audit and figure out what appliances that you want. Do you want an Instapot? Do you want an instant kettle? Do you want a microwave? Do you want an air fryer? Do you want a whole bunch of, mostly kitchen appliances are going to be your biggest power draw. But if you are kind of looking at that sort of thing and figuring out how much power draw you're going to have through that power audit, then you're going to be able to determine how big of a system that you're needing to get. So we're only talking 12 volt now, but let's talk 24 volt. So 24 volt is going to basically take all of that power and consolidate it, because you can get away with using smaller gauge wiring and you don't have to have as many batteries and the variety of things that you can do, you can make into a smaller space. So rather than having 8 batteries laid out, you can now have 4 batteries laid out and have the same amount of power available to you. If you're using 24 volt high amp hour batteries, like 200 amp hour batteries, then now you're down to using 2 batteries instead of 8 batteries at 12 volt at 100 amp hour. So again, going back to that battery bank and figuring out a little bit of your power system and your power audit and what you're going to use for power, then you can determine whether you want to go with a 12 volt or a 24 volt or potentially even a 48 volt. Though with 48 volt, there's not a lot of appliances out there that support a 48 volt system. So now you're having to take that 48 volts and reduce it down to 12 volts to be able to use in that power bank. So just keep that in mind as you kind of have those questions about 12, 24, or 48. Okay, so now that we've done a power audit, we've kind of figured out a little bit of what you're going to use in the space and how you're going to use it. Now you can start to move forward with build planning and how we're going to put everything together. So again, just to kind of touch on some of these things. Real quick. There's 3 ways to charge your battery system. So you can either do it through solar power or alternate power source like a wind turbine or something like that. You can do shore power and you can do alternator power. So let's dissect that a little bit. Alternator power, if you run 24 volt, what do you run 12 volt accessories? So you do reducers in there. So just kind of give you a little bit of an idea with that. Okay, so alternator power. There are high amp alternators out there for specific vehicles. And you can get either a 12 volt high amp or a 24 volt high amp alternator. You can use a DC to DC computer, which is going to convert that power coming off the alternator and give you charge into your battery. There's also DC to DC chargers that you can use that will do 30 amps into your battery, and you don't have to have an extra alternator. You can use the current coming from your alternator and run it back to a 30 amp DC to DC computer and be able to trickle charge into your battery. You can also use shore power, which is a shore power plug. Most Class B RVs have a 30 amp shore power plug. I would suggest using that as opposed to using a 50 amp, just because it gives you more accessibility. Not everywhere has 50 amp available. So 30 amp is something. And then also you also have the alternative of solar power and like wind turbine and that sort of thing, which I kind of view more as like trickle charging, because roof real estate is really important. And if you're covering your entire roof with solar panels, then you're kind of in a spot where you maybe don't have room for a skylight or a max fan or that sort of thing. So 3 points of charge. alternative, which is going to be solar or wind turbine or a variety of other products, shore power or alternator power. So that's how you're going to charge your system up. Power is going to be one of those things that we can dissect, but it would take a long time, and I want to get through a lot more information here. So we've gone through insulation, we've gone through power. Now we want to talk about exterior accessories and where you're going to spend a lot of money in exterior accessories. Those things can be things that you can add to your van build later. And so I would suggest being in your van, checking it out, and then determining whether you need a winch or rear boxes or that sort of thing. The last part that I kind of want to touch on before we kind of move on here is a lot of people run their wiring. They kind of consider their van to be kind of like a home. And so they'll run wiring through walls. And if you put your walls in and then you put your cabinetry in and then you get all your stuff in there and then a wire goes bad because it's chafed against some metal that you didn't sheathe properly, or you accidentally put a screw through it or something. Now you're having to disassemble or really kind of have a bit of a pain in the neck on your hands to be able to get past your power or your wiring. So what I strongly suggest is that once you have your insulation done, your subwalls in, then you actually make your cabinet carcasses and figure in a little bit of space. So one of the things that we do here is like your galley would be 20 inches deep, and then we use 20-inch drawer slides, but we face frame our cabinets, and so that gives you an extra 3/4 of an inch. And I'm kind of getting into the detail here so that you can see that the reason why we're doing that is so that we can run your plumbing and your wiring through the back of the cabinet, and then that way that plumbing and that wiring is always accessible. The biggest mistake that I see a lot of DIYers make is they bury their systems. They build around things, and it ends up getting to a place where you don't have accessibility. And so when you try to get it serviced or someone needs to get in there and look around at things, you got to keep things accessible. So as you're building stuff, you need to definitely make those considerations because what ends up happening is, you end up spending a lot of money for someone to disassemble something to get access to a heater or to wiring or to plumbing. We recently in Portland had very cold temperatures and a lot of pipes burst and a lot of accumulator tanks burst, that sort of thing. So definitely make those considerations as you're building out or planning for the build in your van. You definitely need to make sure that you have accessibility to be able to make repairs and that sort of thing. So as you're doing your van build, definitely create the chases or spaces for your plumbing, wiring, and those considerations to make sure that you have accessibility for repair. The biggest problem that we see is people come to us, they've spent a lot of money building their van, and then we're having to come to them and say, we're going to spend so much labor taking this apart that now, you're over budget on something that you did. So let's, again, make that consideration. The climate control is kind of the last thing I want to touch on before we start opening up things to questions. There's a variety of different ways to go with climate control. Relating back to the lifestyle that you want to be in, whether you want to have air conditioning, whether you want to have forced air heating, whether you want to have radiant floor heating. Those are all considerations that you can make. There's a few different systems out there. There's ones that run straight off of electrical power. If you're trying to use electrical power to heat water through like a Bosch heater or something like that, keep in mind that you have to turn that switch on, turn your inverter on, wait for that water to heat up, which is going to take a lot of energy. And then you have about 4 to 8 gallons of hot water to use. But once that water is taken down, you're still reducing your power load to like get that hot water. So that's the advantage of using heat exchangers, because heat exchangers are going to allow you to heat your water, potentially use for your heater, forced air heater, and then also be able to throw a radiant floor loop into that as well. The great part about radiant floor heating is that if you do it right, you actually are heating everything up in the van as well as the air. So if you're using a forced air heater, you heat up all the air, you open up your side door, all that heat escapes, and then you have to close your door and wait for the van to heat up again. Whereas radiant heat is one of those things where it will actually warm up the cabinetry, it warms up everything in the van. So sometimes you can even have the side door open and still have everything nice and warm inside, because all that heat is radiating up. There's different types of radiant systems, and a lot of people I've seen on the internet have suggested using electrical floor mats and that sort of thing. That's going to create more of like a warm floor than it is provide you with radiant heat. So I would suggest strongly of using a heat exchanger system with a glycol system, and that is going to create the ability to get multiple systems done at once. So you can create your hot water, you can create your forced air heat, and then if you want to go kind of luxury, now you can put in radiant heat floors and have that radiant heat as well. So that's kind of a majority of the systems. The water systems, to touch on that real quick, you have your freshwater tank, your gray water tank. A lot of people will put their gray water tank underneath your vehicle. I would suggest actually putting your gray water tank in the highest use area, which would be underneath your kitchen sink. That way it's really easy to see if it's full or not. You can hook up a ball valve, and so that you can automatically expunge it without having to do any adjustment to valves, that sort of thing. You can clean it out because it's accessible. And so I would highly suggest that you put gray water tank underneath the sink, and so that you can use it often. Then what you can do, if you're trying to do like a black water system and gray water system, well, your gray water tank that's under your sink can still drain into a larger gray water system down below, which gives you more water to be able to flush your black water pipe out. Once you've let your black water go out through the stinky slinky, then you can actually hit your gray water bell valve, and that will chase behind it and clean out that stinky slinky. So if you're just going with gray water systems, I highly suggest that you put the gray water tank under the sink so that you can keep an eye on it. You can just hit a button and expunge it. And you can also, for like a shower or something like that, you can put a smaller tank underneath, like a 5-gallon tank. And then that way you can expunge that after every shower and not be carrying around kind of the sour water that could potentially give you a really strong vinegary smell as you're driving down the road. So keeping those gray water tanks to a place to where you can empty them and keep them accessible is something that I strongly suggest. Another quick pointer that I would say is that a lot of weight goes into these vans. And so doing a suspension system on them as well, and suspension upgrade, is something that I highly recommend. We actually require it on all the builds that we do. And so there's a variety of different things that you can do, but I would at least upgrade your struts and shocks, and potentially your leaf springs in the back, so that you can handle the weight. It gives you better control, better steering, and also better ride overall, better stance, and gives you the possibility of having accessibility into areas that are a little bit further out and inaccessible. So, so touching on the most important systems throughout the van, there's so many other varieties of things that you can do, but the goal of this talk was to kind of give you an idea of how to lay out the process, and get you to think about how everything, your lifestyle that you're going to do at the beginning, so that you can then marry the systems together and that are going to help support. There's a variety of things that go into each one of these systems. So water, climate control, power, insulation, tech. But the biggest thing to consider in all of this is making sure that you have access, making sure that you insulate yourself very well in your van, so that you don't have problems coming in the future for some of the other systems, such as climate control. And then doing a power audit, so that you can determine how much space or how much power you're going to be using in the amount of space that you need, and what appliances you're going to do, and that sort of thing. I can tell you all the details about how to build a power system and how to do all these things, but mostly what I wanted to cover was the process and the thinking out process of this. So so in review, if you want to get a journal and think about a lot of the lifestyle choices that you want to have in your van, what climate you want to be in, what terrain you want to be in, personal habits, cooking habits, cleanliness habits, things like things that you don't think about, such as laundry or garbage and recycling. Make sure that you bring all of that into how cooking habits, another one. Make sure you bring all of that into your considerations, and then do a power audit. Determine what appliances that you want to have the most, and what things you want to have in the van, such as air conditioning, radiant heat floors, forced air heating. Once you kind of figure out that stuff, then you can start thinking about your insulation system. The things to consider in insulation is how many windows you're going to put into your van. If you do put a lot of windows in your van, finding the appropriate window coverings that are going to maintain that R value, and that you're just not putting up fabric curtains, because it's not going to help you with that R value. And then also doing doing multiple materials in your insulation, so that you're not dependent on just one insulation material to, protect you from outside surface to inside surface. Once you get your subwalls up and you start doing cabinetry and that sort of thing, I do not recommend putting your plumbing or your electrical in the walls of the van. I would put it into the cabinetry carcasses that you use. And then that way you can maintain and keep everything accessible, because things go wrong in these vans, and you're going to need to be able to have access to deal with any of the issues in the future. For your van goes through basically an earthquake every day. So make sure that you have things accessible and that they are serviceable, or you can bring it to somebody to service. So that's kind of what I got for presentation. Let's go ahead and open up things to some questions for the remainder of our time here, and then let's see what we can do from there. So how about a thin layer of spray foam to act as a vapor barrier thermal break? I would probably advise not to use spray foam for a variety of reasons. Mostly you can get the same exact effect as spray foam with the multiple layers of material. Let's see. Okay, some of the other questions that I saw kind of as we were going through this talk was, you know, as far as process and all that kind of thing, definitely, let's see, definitely make sure that, like I said, you really dissect your lifestyle and figure out how you're going to live in this van and not out of this van. Let's see, pre-built kitchen cabinets, a good idea. So let's talk materials really quick. I would suggest using plywood. I know that there's a lot of other methods out there. But if you use a really good lightweight, solid core plywood with either a fir or poplar core, it's going to keep the plywood lightweight, and you're also going to be able to, wood moves a lot. So as you're moving through your van, those cabinets and everything are flexing, and they're actually built to be able to absorb that flex. If we start doing like an aluminum cabinet structure and we bolt it in the wall, that is now a very solid thing. So if you see a lot of tool trucks and things, those cabinets are always loosening up and coming off the walls. We've had a number of people come into our service center where their cabinets just fall down. So definitely make sure that you research your materials. But as far as plywood is concerned, I would suggest going with a lightweight, solid core plywood. You want to stay away from plywood that is soft on the outside. So using a cabinet grade plywood is going to be great. And then using that solid core is going to keep your weight down, and pretty comparable to, say, doing 80-20 structure and then sheeting everything with like bamboo or Baltic. Baltic plywood I would use only for your drawers, because it's a very heavy plywood and it's a structural plywood. So you can use it for your drawers to maintain that your drawer slides and that sort of thing are not going to pull out during vibration. But definitely make sure that that you, like, if you're using 3/4 inch Baltic birch plywood for your cabinets, those cabinets are going to be heavy, and we want to keep the weight down in these things. So as far as structural plywood is concerned, use solid core on your bigger, thicker pieces like your cabinetry. Use 1/2 inch Baltic birch on your drawers and things, because those are the things that are getting the most movement on things. And then I would recommend face framing, because by face framing, you're putting a solid wood on the outside of your cabinet, and that's going to maintain that your hinges and screws and all that stuff do not pull out of a solid wood, as opposed to a plywood that has multiple layers. And if you start putting a screw to that multiple layer, it's going to split. Let's see. How thick of plywood do you recommend? I would say that in your cabinetry, I would recommend doing 3/4 inch. But again, look for that solid core, lightweight ply that either has a poplar or fir core. And then again, using the Baltic multiple layer plywood for the structural things like your drawers. Birch is a good plywood. I have someone asking about birch. What that is going to be doing is mostly dealing with the veneer of the outside. So we use maple and birch plywoods, but they still have that solid core of fir or poplar, keeping things lighter. The thing that you do want to avoid the most is having a particle wood. And so a lot of prefab cabinets, like I see a few people asking about IKEA, those are going to be made out of particle wood. And if you put a screw into particle wood and then you're driving down the road doing 80 miles an hour and you're going over bumps, those screws are going to loosen up in that particle wood. So I do not advise using IKEA prefab cabinets. I would definitely look for a cabinet maker, or they're very easy to make. They're just square boxes. So you can potentially, we're going to have some videos up one day. I'm a bit of a Luddite, so I don't do a lot of technical stuff, but as far as like, instructions and that stuff, look to our YouTube page in the future, and we'll have some tips and pointers out there about how to assemble cabinetry, things to think about, all that kind of stuff. Please feel free to reach out to us here at Nomadik Customs. You can reach us at www.nomadiccustoms.com. Nomadik is spelled with a K rather than a C. And man, it's been great hanging out with you guys, and we'll look forward to hearing from you. And please reach out to us anytime with any questions or concerns. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. All right. I think that's it. Maybe not. We'll get a couple other questions in until I am informed that we're over here. Thank you. Thank you guys for the compliments. Thank you for everything. It's been a pleasure. I have a quick question about how to fit a van mattress in sideways. Basically, you're going to have to go with flare spaces or be able to create window rings inside the van so you utilize that extra 4 inches of space. ProMasters are the widest and the shortest. Transits are the tallest and the skinniest, and Sprinters are in between. So what van do you love to build on the most? I would say probably Sprinters and ProMasters. What butyl-based product do you recommend? I would say either SoundSkins or Killmat. Use the 50 mil Killmat. Okay. What would you recommend for really cold winters, water tank installations? I would recommend that you put all of your water, gray water, fresh water, inside your van. There is a quality difference between Killmat and SoundMat. SoundMat is going to have an R value of 3 to 4. Killmat's going to have an R value of about 1. Okay, so I prefer Sprinters over Fords because Fords are made of some unobtainium metal, and we at least go through 30 drill bits every time we build a Ford out. I'm pretty sure that's about the end of our session here. So again, appreciate you guys' interest. Please reach out to us at Nomadik Customs. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and then also our website, Nomadik, spelled with a K, Nomadik, customs.com. All right. So thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Thank you so much.